Welcome back to my channel, Star Booze.
Over 21 years, Norm Abram constructed cubits, kitchens, and everything else on television. Then, in 2009, he abruptly started walking away. Millions of dollars were being made by the show. However, there was something going on that viewers observed. It has nothing to do with money or ratings. What he later disclosed regarding of in his mind would be shocked by those last season's greatest admirers. The cameras did not appear. The entire narrative. In 1979's summer, Norm Abram nearly turned to leave the work that transformed his life. A little 12 by 6 foot barn has to be constructed in the backyard of a house in Massachusetts' Lincoln. The Russell Moorish, the owner, had previously been by 3 contractors. Norm wasn't thrilled either. Normally had completed significant renovations, including this one paid little. However, it was a slough season and he had to pay $2,800 his team, so he accepted it. What was captured, it wasn't simply the build that caught Mash's interest. That's how Norm organized for hours. Each piece of lumber, according to its grade and size. Before to beginning, that small gesture revealed this dude was unique. Mirage. The Norm was just another struggling person at the moment. Contractor with 2 children and a small business workers. He barely earned $85,000 a year. He considered moving to full-time kitchen remodeling to stand in the bustling market of Massachusetts when Mirage requested that he participate in a new this old house. Norm is a PBS program. Panicked. He detested cameras. His palms trembled. He was unable to speak clearly on the initial screen test. However, Mirage saw something in that apprehensive vibe. He believed that viewers would find it authentic. He was correct. After 6 months, Norm was set consistently for 2 years. Spectators wrote hundreds of people visit him each week to question him, seeking guidance on woodworking. The actual show nearly didn't occur. PBS wasn't interested in it. They believed that remodeling a house was tootle. Mirage was required to rephrase. It asked not for amusement, but for adult education. He was given the go-ahead in this way. Even Norm was not intended to be the main face. The idea was to employ various contractors for every episode. However, when they began filming that first Dorchester's Victorian home, it was obvious that Norm had a unique quality. He was serene. He gave a straightforward explanation. The audience identified with him. The structural turd Norm remained. And in a year, this historic home became the largest PBS How to Perform for 2.8 million viewers viewing each and every episode. In 1988, it was generating over $15 million annually for Peeps from licensing and merchandising. Meanwhile, the small barn behind Morish's home was going to become Yankee Workshop's new location wasn't constructed from the ground up. It was an improvement over Norm had constructed the identical barn years earlier. Originally a shed for garden equipment cost $180,000. They had to construct a renovation project surrounding the old foundation with altering it with supports made of special steel as well as an intricate roof design. Within, the room was crammed with elite equipment for woodworking. A unisaw table valued at $12,000, $8,500 for a Powermatic planer, and many more. The barn door itself was not a joke. It weighed more over 400 pounds and required a track system that cost $3,200 to open and near. All of that cash, all of that work, need to record a single individual instructing others on to do woodworking. The 7th of January 1989, unexpected events occurred on TV. A bearded man who was quiet at a tiny workshop, looked tough camera, and started constructing a medicinal cabinet. That moment was pivotal. The perception of woodworking. The individual is Abram Norm. It was the new Yankee Workshop. Additionally, since that Dana thing about do-it-yourself television going forward will never be the same. The concept begged. Tiny Russell Moorish producer longed to leave this old house and concentrate on the furnishings. They constructed a 936 square foot shed, loaded it up with equipment, and gave the spotlight to Norm. There was no ostentatious cast, no prearranged drama, just a camera, a bench, and one man that shifted like an interested student, observing above his shoulder. It was silent, concentrated, and oddly hypnotizing. However, people were unable to look away. The project was easy. A medical cabinet motivated by a Shaker design standard, spotted in a historic village in Massachusetts. Utilized box, joints, plywood, and red oak. Joinery, nothing special, but everything foam. He described each step from cutting through to the end. The audience wasn't simply seeing the construction of a cabinet. They were observing the development of a philosophy. Basic supplies, unambiguous procedures, and accurate workmanship, the type of job that anyone might give it a shot if they listened. And they did. The letters began to flood in. Images of completed bookcases, cabinets, tables. Not only were viewers learning, they were constructing. A few of them were retired. Some were untrained young fathers in woodworking. PBS was astonished by the response. It was not even intended for the show to air nationwide immediately, but demand for seeds spread throughout the nation in a matter of weeks. It quickly aired in Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Norm's steady voice and oceans were bridged by hands. Sales of tools increased. A surge in red was observed in lumberyards. Demand for oak woodworking classes in the area were filled all at once. People began clubs. They exchanged advice after meeting in garages. Constructed Norm's projects with him. It was no longer merely a television program. It was a movement, a fresh approach to education, a newer community of sorts. Behind the lens, things happened quickly. Every episode was filmed within 2 days. Norm prepared everything prior to the filming. Each board was sliced. Every tool in place, every movement intended. The actual workshop resembled a device. Drill and table saw in the center, press west, planer and jointer tough north. The final section of the northeastern corner. Nothing happened at random. There was a spot for each tool. Each incision was Norm did it. No handoffs, no tricks. If he sanded the thing that required it, he applied adhesive if necessary. The project was constructed multiple times, one for the performance, one for pictures, and occasionally a third to make sure everything is correct. It was draining, but Norm made it appear easy, and that was a component of thematic. His credibility was based on the fact that seen him working. Each joint, each complete, every task, and no changes could fake that. Yankee Workshop's new location taught more than simply woodworking. It was evident the significance of constructing anything with take care. It demonstrated how much preparation in one cabinet is used for patience or care. It accomplished all of that without never stopping talking. No tricks, no just wood tools, and a man who doesn't have any how to use them. Rarely does a TV exhibition to create furniture and a devoted following base simultaneously. However, the new Yankee Workshop did just that. Above, he created 282 episodes for 21 seasons. In the same manner, each and every joint and nail belonged to him. Doing most of the time, he finished unworked for the entire show in just 2 days. Seldom did that rhythm shift. The majority of, except for the last season, contained 13 episodes. One that caused the number 2 double to 26 Definal Project, a roll-top desk with 2 parts, broadcast on June 27, 2009. At the conclusion, Norm has finished about 235 distinct initiatives, and viewers could purchase each make a $9.95 plan. It wasn't merely a show, it was a strict, dependable, and surprisingly lucrative. Individuals stopped eating it. On IMDb, the show had a rating of 9.0. That figure more than just remarkable. It's almost untouchable for this type of show. It is adjacent to Hollywood blockbusters and top-tier dramas. Here's the twist though. This was a show about woodworking. No explosions, no famous people. Only one man and his instruments. However, viewers adored it. They stated it was nearly as enjoyable to see as to construct. Even people using simple instruments said they could still follow along. Norm had roughly $15,000 worth of apparatus. Many viewers did in single quotes nevertheless, they believed they could succeed as well. That was the show's strength. It didn't speak in a demeaning manner. It beckoned visitors inside, and they arrived. Not within the millions, thousands. This was amusement. In fact, people constructed objects. Viewers turned into weekend warriors. A few became professionals. Norm's serene, the straightforward teaching approach became the foundation of a movement. The program didn't altered lives, not just hobbies. Weekend plans revolved around it. It was dubbed sawdust therapy. Even after several years, the official YouTube channel attracted more than 100,000 subscribers to a series about woodworking. That's huge. The parts with commenced turned into letters of affection. People said began construction as a result of Norm, it regardless of the stage of life they were in. The show authorized them to attempt and the understanding to be successful. Critics also took notice. The program received 5 nominees for Emmys. It merited its position as a valuable teaching resource, not only for enthusiasts but for those who are interested in artistry. Norm emerged as the reliable woodworking voice. The store's arrangement, the repetition builds, and the camera work for every project was purposeful. He even constructed other duplicates, either to donate or for testing. The focus detailing wasn't a choice, it was thorough. His well-known safety line was included in off the history of television. There was no guess in that. The number of viewer stools, researched costs, and completed the computation. One reviewer on IMDb put it simply. He had inexpensive Chinese tools and couldn't identify. Norm's room had numerous routers, enormous sanders, and devices that required 3 individuals to make a move. The envy wasn't the worst thing, it was the embarrassment. People felt insignificant, observing him as if they were acting to work as woodworkers during his lifetime. Some completely gave up, others just watched in exasperation. They were unable to stay up. That hurt was exacerbated when Norm began phoning his projects. Builds during the weekend. He would create a cabinet in half an hour. Audience believed. They may follow suit, they couldn't. Most took months. Some people never completed what he wrote. One viewer wrote, "Takes me months to complete in a weekend," and he was not mistaken. In the background, Norm produced several iterations of every project. He had one for the show and one to test, and occasionally another for charity. However, the audience was unaware of that. They recently observed last cut. Seamless, faultless, Quick, no errors, no hesitancy. That morale was crushed by deception. Internet discussion boards full of irate enthusiasts inquiring what went wrong. The response was insignificant. They simply lacked a camera team and weeks of preparation. Norm's body was also damaged. Once Hickner lodged his shop's concrete floor, ruined his feet. That one statement stated a lot. The ideal workshop was hidden behind long days, no solace, simpler pressure and concrete. He had put in 12 hours in a row. During heated moments like Ash returned home after the demolition of the Essex house. According to his wife, he could hardly stand. The floor was spotless. The walls were tidy. The lighting was ideal. However, inside, the man was in pain. That remark shattered the illusion. Fans, for a minute, tease him as a man, a legend, rather than an hurting, weary man who created beauty standing on chilly concrete and doing things, watched by millions. The new Yankee Workshop believed they were observing a professional studio. Actually, they were seeing a moment of enchantment in the backyard of someone. The entire situation was captured behind a historic farmhouse in Massachusetts, out of sight of the public. Fans who frequently attempted to visit the location completely missed it, even when standing only a couple of feet away. It was an illusion. Strong across the show's 21-year run. However, what strengthened the illusion even further was how flawless everything appeared. Norm stumbled. He measured precisely. His task appeared to be effortless. That wasn't machine. What the audience was unaware of was the fact that every project was constructed twice. Norm constructed a complete prototype prior to the diode camera's ever roll. He examined each cut, examined each joint, and resolved each issue beforehand. Then and only then did filming starts. In this manner, Norm could rebuild it confidently, step by step, stride, as though everything were taking place in real time. Every episode may have displayed only 22 minutes. However, behind the scenes, 40 to 60 hours of hard work went into that project. Labor. The show felt seamless because of this. Even when pressed, Norm wasn't on creating something lovely. He was acting with complete control. However, even the most skilled artisans have their moments. One of Norm's errors turned into renowned. His task was to work on a butlistable, a sophisticated item that required accuracy as you cut the upper portion. He made a mistake, too bad to correct. It was useless, yet, rather than throwing it away, the staff nailed it to the wall after removing it. They made it into a trophy of sorts. That shattered fragment remained there for the remainder of the show. Members of the crew proudly pointed it out. It brought to mind even perfectionists understand it. Incorrect at times. That one defective board revealed a more significant truth than all the flawless cutbacks could possibly make. Within that workshop, each tool had a specific function. Each square foot was organized. It was 936 square feet overall, although it functioned as a significantly bigger store. Norm could relocate without wasting any time in between stations. Just one step. There wasn't along the west wall, a drill press and a sturdy bench position to capture the ideal quantity of light. On the wall to the south, the radial arm saw and mitre bench were positioned for optimal convenience as well as angles of the camera. Standing in the middle was the table saw as the shop's main attraction. Surrounded by secure and well-lit pathways, allowing for filming distance. Even the floors were chosen to control the sound. The electrical system was made to order. There were outlets everywhere. The cords were lighting rigs were concealed and blended in. Exactly everything was constructed for good TV, speed and safety. However, what really made the projects come to life took place in a chamber that no one could see. The completing room off camera. In a different room, the group in Norm sanded. Each item was stained and sealed. This each room has its own ventilation systems. Adjustments for humidity and strong lighting displayed the smallest defects. Though the circumstances were ideal for applying complete, it was not possible to do that in the primary workshop. Not with all the open doors and camera movement. Even there was another building where lumber was kept maintained at the ideal temperature to keep the wood safe. A few of the instruments were reproduced in that final section so that while filming, the crew might prepare items. Proceeded in another location. The entire process spanned several buildings. Although it appeared to the audience to be one tidy, a single man runs a little shop. The Norm Abram's workshop floor appeared sturdy, tidy and competent. However, that the concrete floor became silent. Enemy. Every time they filmed, Norm stood on it day, typically 8 to 12 hours in a row, season after season, week after week. It continued in that manner for 21 years. His physique began to fail. The floor didn't take in anything. With each step it slammed up, returned to his legs, his feet, and his. When he arrived at his lat, the pain became constant. In the 50s, Norm had back issues, edema in the joints, and plantar fasciitis-related foot pain. He relied on daily medication just to function. The slab had been poured back in 1988 before the show began. It covered 2,400 square ft and was 6 in thick, built to last, not to comfort. Medical experts say working on concrete for years like that can raise the risk of muscle and bone problems by 300%. That's exactly what happened to Norm. Nobody on the outside talked about it, but behind the scenes, it was a slow, grinding health crisis. Norm's job was also very different from what people saw in this old house. That show had teams of workers, electricians, plumbers, landscapers, painters. Norm was one of many. His workload there was light, just 2 or 3 days per episode. However, their new Yankee Workshop was a one-man mission. He did everything himself. Head signed the plans, picked the wood, cut, glued, nailed, stained, polished, and explained every step to the camera. Each episode took him 4 to 6 weeks to complete. Most weeks he worked 40 to 60 hours. Season 15 had 13 episodes. That meant Norm put in over 780 hours of labor that year just for that show. That's the same as 5 straight months of full-time work in a single season. Meanwhile, this old house barely asked Ed for 150 hours of his time per year. The math didn't lie. He was doing the work after full-time jobs without a break and without backup. The pressure never stopped. Producer Russell Marash once said it bluntly. Norm didn't just host new Yankee Workshop, he worked it. Really worked it. From 1989 to 2009, held 285 full projects, heavy ones. He lifted and moved wood that weighed hundreds of pounds. Over the years, it added up to around 2.3 million pounds of lumber. That's the same as lifting 18 train cars. He also made more than 47,000 perfect cuts with his saws and spent 8,400 hours crouched over WORKBENCHES. By 2007, things started to slow down. Norm couldn't tolerate 12-hour filming days anymore. They cut the schedule down to 8 hours. Insurance costs skyrocketed. Between 2005 and 2008, they went up by 400%. Norm had aged into a high-risk worker at 60 years old. He was still using the same heavy tools and machines she'd used in his 40s. The crew started proving him more breaks, but the damage had been done. Even Morash confessed later they had pushed him too hard for too long. Norm also worked under natural standards. Each measurement had to be precise. Not even 1/64th of an inch and the shot was ruined. A mistake compelled them to chuck out. In one episode, Cherry would and restart for $3,400 the entire scene. Norm averaged nearly each part has 3 retakes. A few pictures required 12 attempts. That pressure increased. Over time, even sawdust was tracked by the workers' patterns. The lighting had to be ideal. The proper placement of the tools was essential. Norm was performing, instructing and constructing Shimshlanti, and it needed to be perfect. He frequently remained at the workshop just to practice cuts until midnight. He desired it to be flawless the following day. No only observing that portion, but it did occur week after week. By the last season in Norm was nearly 60 in 2009. The position had become excessive. The insurance provider conducted health examinations in 2008. They discovered he had lost 23% of his grip strength since 2003. He was reacting more slowly. His endurance had diminished, so they extended the time spent filming. They granted him days of rest. It took 4 episodes. Days to shoot. Despite the fact that it once take only 1 or 2, Norm was clearly exhausted on the set. Projects that previously appeared simple were suddenly difficult. In 2009, Norm the woodworking community was stunned by Abram following 21 years of construction, and he left without missing a beat. From Yankee Workshop's new location. The program was still going strong. Supporters were devoted. The money was coming in. However, Norm had arrived at his limit. It was his 60th birthday. The projects had grown more difficult, drawn out, more substantial. Early in the season, he constructed little items such as nightstands and chairs. However, he was tackling by the end. Complete kitchen renovations. A single project, a roll-top desk, was quite complicated in 1998. 2 episodes had to be separated out of it. 18 years later, the program made an effort to Russell's 9-part kitchen renovation Marash's house. It was a beast. Norm hours were spent hunched over on concrete. Hoisted heavy lumber and workbenches. He did everything without grumbling, yet his physique sensed it. In the background, it was even more resilient. Norm would do the same RESHOOT scene repeatedly in order to obtain the ideal angle. Each error had to be fixed. Nothing was left up to chance. Sanding caused pain in his wrists. His rear ratched from lifting. The fatigue increased. Every episode. Additionally, while the show maintained its composed demeanor, Norm was coming to an individual breaking point. He stayed. During a storm, he didn't give up an irritation. He made a consideration. He desired family time. He wished to construct for himself, and so forth. On October 16, 2009, he formally announced it. He was resigning. It wasn't only his decision. After a while, the decision was made. Talks Russell Morish, Norm THEWGBH Boston and producers all concurred. Without him, the show could not continue. They made no attempt to replace him. MASH stated it quite plainly. Nobody else was able to bear the burden that Norm had been carrying for 2 decades. Norm did more than host. He wasted performance. Fans had speculated that perhaps the network wasn't working. Perhaps money was snug. The viewership may have dropped, but that was all untrue. Actually, the show was doing quite well. Covered sponsorships, the spending plan. The ratings were good. DVDs along with project plans continued to sell. Even the website generated revenue. It was a well-maintained machine, stable finances, and cherished Norm's even more amazing choice. He did not depart due to necessity, but because he discerned as well. He rebuffed pressure in favor of peace, left prosperity behind in order to safeguard anything more intimate. His well-being, his family. When that happened, he had finished 235 distinct projects, mattresses, benches, desks, shelters, and even boats. No shortcuts, only repetitions. Every project required a new strategy, a new method, and meticulous attention to detail. The speed was unrelenting. Harder builds came every year. Each and every something new was needed for the season. Fine 2008, the 9-part kitchen had stretched its group to the utmost. However, Norm continued pushing until he came to the realization that he had expressed all he had to say. Hadn't want to say it again. He didn't wish to reduce the bar. He wasn't exhausted, he was whole. Additionally, the timing was right. Norm worked for years, balancing 2 important programs, although this elderly his home allowed him to travel and impart information. The new Yankee Workshop on location maintained him confined to a store, managing all by itself. Later, Morash stated that the workload at this old residence was less demanding. It did not require the same level of physical grind. For this reason, Norm decided to go on. That particular one, he was able to breathe more easily. He didn't go in search of a higher salary or a fresh chance. He went because he wished to spend time with his family. He desired time to construct without using cameras. He'd having spent 21 years in the woodworking industry out of his finest. Then, without any drama or controversy, he stepped stealthily